Hello everyone, I'm Maya Pawinska-Sims. I'm the EMEA editor of PRovoke, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the second part in our new series, Being Human in a Tech-Enabled World, in partnership with AxiCom. The series is looking at different aspects of what life and work as humans and communicators and creatives look like now and how they might look in the future through the lens of technology as well, or using on a day-to-day basis now. After our first episode focusing on the workplace, I've got three incredible award-winning creatives, what promises to be a really stimulating, enlightening and relatable discussion about how creativity is changing in this strange times we continue to find ourselves in. First up, we have a very warm welcome to Aoife O'Leary, one of a duo of ridiculously talented young creatives. She runs Girls Do Ads with Lena Kesdi and has already picked up awards including D&AD New Blood Pencil and One to Watch, and has been a Cannes Young Lions Finalist. So well on her way to a glittering career in the creative industry. And we've also got Sean DallasKidd, founding partner of consumer creative and comms firm Demonstrate, ex-creative director at firms including J. Walter Thompson and FleishmanHillard, quite an impressive CV. And last but not least, we have Graeme Anthony, better known as G, AxiCom's first ever creative director, who's bringing a consumer PR approach to B2B tech campaigns, which is really exciting. And G spent 10 years at Frank, where he worked on campaigns for the likes of Burger King, Diet Coke, Huawei and Atom Bank. Welcome all three of you, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Let's move on to our first discussion point. Let's talk about what the impact's been on creative teams and creativity in communications in a broader sense, when the world was thrust into the virtual environment overnight, as we all were 15 months ago or so. G, do you want to kick off with what your experience was?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it's going to be very hard to summarize it as an industry thing, just because every creative brain is wired differently. So when this happened overnight, everyone will have found themselves in a completely different boat. And then how they sort of converted over was really down to, I guess, their previous experiences or how they found themselves operating before. Through my own experience, it actually worked quite seamless, because at my previous agency, we'd been trialing remote working for probably a good year before we all became remote ourselves. So actually the next day I sort of woke up and could still function pretty much as I did the day before. But I think the thing which everyone has struggled with the most, I'm not sure it's really the virtual environment, but I think it's that isolation, I guess. That's probably the bit which has been hardest to overcome for most creatives, but especially those who I guess find their inspiration through really sort of feeling the moment, feeling the environment, using every sense to get that little spark that they need to come up with an idea. So, I can really appreciate how that has been hard for those individuals, but at the same time, I think it's about adapting and just coming to terms. I think on a national level, I think everyone sort of had the same mindset back then, where it was a bit like, fucking hell, what do we do now? You know what I mean? It wasn't just our creative process that had been disrupted. It was our whole entire lives. So, I think a lot of people misinterpreted that as, oh crap, I've got creative block. Well, no, I think we've got a life block at the moment, and you're sort of missing the point here. But I think once we've managed to sort of realize that the world will still spin and things will still move forward, you're able to adapt and pivot like most businesses and all our clients, even agencies, were asked to do. We had to sort of really dig deep and try to find a way for us to move forward. And I guess, it's a bit of a cliche, but when you lose one of your senses, other ones become more powerful. And I think that sort of has adapted and evolved and ultimately manifested through this new virtual environment. And we've just got to sort of test things and find new ways of working so we can still get that outcome of really good, punchy creative.
Yeah.
I think if there's one thing about our industry, it's its resilience. It's, you know, as soon as we get something between our teeth, we never let go of it. That's one of the beauty of the creative mind. But then also what we do is we explore, because that's how we create things. We are always looking. We never switch off. So I think, you know, we by and large adapted quite well. And then also, I mean, I'm not sure it really suffered. I mean, the beautiful thing from this whole situation was that, I mean, we had an abundance of time on our hands, and boredom bred creativity, where all of a sudden people were like, shit, I got nothing to do. Oh, I'm going to try pick up a pencil, or, you know, I'm going to try something else. And it was wonderful to see all these individuals find skills and hidden talents that they never knew existed. And hopefully it's really bred a whole new generation of unknown creators. I think that's the exciting thing to come out of this.
That's really interesting. Yeah, people who wouldn't necessarily label themselves as creative have kind of come out the woodwork, haven't they? I've seen that, you know, among my own friends as well, and colleagues. Sean, does any of that echo your experience over in California? How have things been for you over the past year? What was it like at that moment where the world changed?
Well, I would say similarly, we were able to make a swift pivot because we are a boutique agency. I would say for the creatives, the challenge has really been, I think, connecting sort of the idea of a brainstorm and that spark. Where do you get that? And so I think a lot of folks have been looking to nature, kind of getting out there. And ironically, when I look back at some of the sort of ways in which people used to say, oh, go out for a walk and do this X, Y, or Z, you know, that's now returning back into the culture of creativity, you know, picking up pencils and drawing, or going out on a walk, or going down to the beach, because you can't, you know, when everything sort of flipped it on its head, you couldn't just go to some of your traditional points of inspiration. You know, most creative agencies and shops were sort of city centric. And so a lot of those gathering spaces were off limits. So I think it gave folks an opportunity to get reconnected with nature again. And I think a lot of that will start to manifest itself in a lot of the work that we start to see, that feeling of optimism, that reconnection with yourself, community, your family, and just personal creativity. And I also think we've also seen a lot of these sort of people who would quickly say they weren't creative. I think all of a sudden, once the sourdough bread making at home became a thing, and everyone got their chef hats on, and their, you know, independent photographer or crocheter or knitter or whatever that is, I think the sort of spark of creativity started just manifesting itself everywhere, because we did have this sort of the sense of boredom and this opportunity to kind of see what really could spark our own personal passions. So it's definitely been an interesting, let's say, 12 or 14 months, wherever we are on the spectrum. We've definitely have adapted to do virtual shoots, to think of creating content or creative solutions in different ways. You know, just the nature of creatives is, if there's a little gap, we will fill that space up with some sort of solution. So I think that part will always work itself out.
Yeah, we'll come back to talk about how you're using technology and new techniques in a little bit. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of re-immersion in nature, because we have had nothing else to do for a year, will kind of come out in the creative work as we go forward. Aoife, coming to you, what's been the impact on you over the past year? You're a bit younger than these two gorgeous guys. What's the impact been on the next generation of creatives for you?
You know, I think originally it was such an easy transition for us, like, you know, being young, our younger, if I'm not being too nice to myself, is the fact that like we live off our phones, our devices. So moving to this like new form of communication wasn't actually new for us. But I think fatigue set in really, really quickly. I think it was really hard to stay motivated, especially as like being part of a team where you're almost kind of like a creative parasite and you feed off one another. It was really, really difficult. I think at the start, sob story, like we, you know, had our first junior role together, and unfortunately after kind of like a month working from home, we lost that position, and we had like a month of nothing. And God, we aged so much in that time. It was incredible because there's so much pressure on every other creative team that I spoke to be producing work, you know, especially work that responded to what's happening. What have you guys made? And you know, you can only wash your hands so many ways. You know, it's like what else can we do to be relevant? And I think it put a lot of pressure on, you know, especially people who are just like straight out of university. You know, you spent months and months kind of crafting this book to get your foot in the door, and then the doors are just completely shut. And they're not only shut, but now there's this whole other list of things that you need to be seen. And I think initially it weighed really, really heavily on us. And, you know, you can put it down to luck or being optimistic, or I don't even know what, but we just kind of forced ourselves to keep talking to each other, like as easy as it would be just to like go and rewatch Friends. Like we set little targets for ourselves each day. Like for us, for instance, something that really helped in that like month period was, and I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it, but it's called 1 minute briefs. It's on Twitter. Every day they release this kind of like quick brief and you respond to it. And every single day we did it, just so we had something that we had to get up for. It was a deadline we had to meet. And it really brought our confidence back in our work, and it brought our confidence back in each other, and that kind of confidence to keep going and that things would get better. And, you know, I think that still remains with a lot of people in my age group, is that confidence is still lacking, because only now we're seeing things turn around. And as you guys said, it's been kind of like a 12 to 14 month period, but for some of these people it feels like a whole longer time, because they've obviously been going through uni and then going out into the big world and going to crits, and it's the same story they've been hearing over and over again. So I'm quite excited to see what's going to come from, you know, lockdown ending and the kind of diversity that we're going to be seeing pour in now, and what I hope that we'll see adapting into the creative field, because I think at the moment there's so much talent out there that hasn't had the opportunity to share their work.
Yeah, it feels like we're at a bit of a tip, you know, it's not a tipping point exactly, but we are all shifting into a new way of working, that it's not going to be a, you know, going back to anything, is it? It's very much moving forward into a new way of working. Graeme, where are you now with stuff? Do you feel like you've settled into a new way of working? I mean, you're just getting back into the office, got lovely AxiCom branding behind you. Where are you now, and where do you see that evolving in terms of how you work as a creative?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it sort of bridges from what we were talking about just now, but one of the biggest challenges I remember wasn't necessarily how we get creative, but it was actually more the briefs we were getting. Creativity needs to answer a problem. We had too many problems, or actually the issue was our clients. I don't mean that derogatory, but what I mean was, because it was such a complex, moving time where day by day, like the goalposts would shift, was that it was actually very difficult to identify a real long-standing problem and then task your creative teams to go about solving that in the way that they do. I mean, I remember that we were really, really busy during lockdown 1. And we were, really putting out a load of proposals left, right, and centre, and none of them came to fruition. And it wasn't because it was poor work; it was because the goalposts had just moved within a week of us having to respond. Our response was no longer relevant to the problem that the client was facing. So that was the hardest part of COVID lockdown, whatever you want to call it, from my aspect. So I guess coming forward now to where we are is because we have a greater understanding, because we have more consistency in our life and a better way of working, and it's a bit more grounded, I guess. Those briefs that we are getting now are more pre-planned, prepared. They are working towards a mid to long-term goal. So it feels good. It feels satisfying and very rewarding to finally come up with creative that is going to come to fruition and actually culminate in something in the end. So I think there's also an interesting side to discuss, which isn't just the output of the creative, but actually that briefing and what we're trying to do is important. And I think that's probably the most important part, or the bit that I value the most at the moment, is actually having those solid, robust goalposts for us to try and score into, I guess.
Sean, what about you? Has the way you've responded to client briefs changed in that sort of way over the past year? Where are you now? And how far do you feel you've evolved since we all went into lockdown as a creative?
Well, it's interesting. The idea behind Demonstrate, the agency, is really to look at things from a integrated, holistic way. So we have sort of traditional advertising, paid media, and earned media, and social digital content under one roof. And I think where we have sort of evolved or really leaned in the last year is around sort of putting brand purpose into action. And so looking at how can that sort of manifest itself in a way to really help set brands up when you hit these type of headwinds. So, it's one thing to promote the product you have in hand today. There's another thing to set up room for your sort of business growth and diversification of it. And so I think the idea of really trying to understand the business objective, both in the short term, medium term, and long term, has been our sort of focus. And then how do you use the different communication levers, so to speak, to kind of drive that messaging or drive that opportunity? And then really being open, I think, and how you do that. I remember there was some quote I saw a while ago where it's something around B2B. It's not B2B, it's human to human, or some sort of tagline someone came up with. But it was this sort of interesting idea that always stuck with me, that it doesn't matter if you're doing brand to consumer communications or business to business communications, because at the two endpoints on either side, it's always a human. And humans engage on multiple platforms, different types of channels. So I think opening up the aperture into how you want to communicate a message and helping bring your brand partner along so that they can kind of look at, maybe I might use, in a sort of technology space, humor to explain something like data security. Because at the end of the day, it's still a person on the other end. And if you could take a complex idea and make it relevant, educational, and funny, then I think, that goes a long way for keeping that brand sort of top of mind in that buyer's sort of consideration set.
Yeah. It feels a bit like the past year we've all just chucked the cards in the air and they're all landing different for everybody. We're in a really weird state of flux at the moment, aren't we? Aoife, what's it been like for you, after that initial shock? where have you guys landed, especially in relation to kind of meeting and client briefs?
I want to know who Graeme's working for, that they have this kind of like time, expansive time. You know, I've noticed, like, we've worked with a bunch of agencies locally and have Girls Do Ad working with smaller clients. What I've noticed is how rapid the turnaround has been on briefs. Like, you could nearly get whiplash. It's that quick. Like last week we had, you know, a tissue, we pitched, we won, and we filmed, and the work is going to be out next week. And it's crazy considering, you know, I think we had like maybe a year in kind of advertising PR world before COVID hit, and you'd usually have maybe like 4 months before such a piece came out. And it's been crazy because I think the expectation is so much higher, and equally you put so much more pressure on yourself because you're like, okay, we're so lucky to be here, and there's thousands of other people who are like dying for this job, like keep going. But like, there's only so much Baraka boost you can have. It's like, I'm quite looking forward to, you know, as Graeme said, these clients come along who are looking for work to come out in a few months' time, because I think we've all had to develop this kind of read the room mentality now when it comes to finding insights, because it's the best work is the work that's like true to consumer. But because people's behaviors and how they consume and their purchasing patterns have changed so much, your ability to find that truth and how long it stays true for has changed. So I think the nature in which a brief comes in and it's executed and it goes back out to the public has just accelerated massively, along with the expectations put on the people who are coming up with the creative.
Yeah, that sounds intense. Goodness me.
It is.
Okay, here's a big question, expanding on a couple of points you guys have already made. Where do you now find creative inspiration from, as everything has changed so much? We've talked a little about nature and making the most of what you do have, but G, where for you is that have the sources of inspiration changed, and how do you think that will continue?
For me, I don't think it changes. Inspiration is everywhere. It's everywhere. There's a saying where it's like, technology advances so much during times of conflict, right? The creativity, it advances so much during times of austerity. When we have something to unite and empower against, with something as a global pandemic tends to have a really important passion point, people want to express themselves. So the beauty of all this is maybe all those hidden creators have really come to the surface, and that's really, being beamed into our living rooms. Not even us going to try and find it through social media, but even on news channels. I mean, these are stories that traditionally wouldn't make, but because the news schedule was dedicated so much to graphs and all that stuff, they needed to try and fill that. So actually, you had some amazing stories come to the surface, and they were, we didn't even have to go find them. They were being put to us. So it sort of made life a bit easier. But I mean, you find creativity from whatever, and thankfully there was a real an abundance of it during this time. From cat filters through to grass, the rise of TikTok and adults taking over that platform, really dodgy haircuts, John Lewis furniture. I mean, Jesus, now you can book virtual tours of the pyramids. You know what I mean? There is this real sort of everyone flexing and pivoting and trying to make their expertise work in this virtual world. Actually, it was fantastic for inspiration. It really sort of broadened everything and really uncovered some things that you would have never have seen before. So it's certainly still there, and I hope that continues. But at the same time, even today, just this first time back down in London and just sort of sitting out looking at the countryside on the train, it's nothing beats that sort of tangibility, but all the sensory explosion that you get.
I'm delighted how delighted you are to be back in the office. I'm sure that'll be shared by many people over the next few weeks and months. Sean, for you, have your sources of inspiration and the way you find those kind of moments, those little sparks of insight, have they broadened out for you as well?
I think everything has gone, like, if we think about the way in which we used to consume, you had a couple of sort of key channels. I think everything has just gotten more niche, more broken down into smaller bits and everywhere. Like, we've now got this like audio revolution and social platforms that have gone backwards. Have gone from like high fidelity visual Instagrammable moments to being a fly on the wall in conversation, on some of these sort of other social channels. To, I think, for me, one of the things that has also been interesting, I've been advising on this platform called REPCO, Represent Collective, where they're bringing stories of people of color up into the forefront. So it's like, I think more people are telling their stories from sort of different perspectives. So I think, I feel as though I'm getting more angles from audio side to sort of slow news has been like one of the things I've been getting into. Love my books. I've gone back to books, doing more like just getting deeper into different types of music, listening or seeing artwork from sort of up and coming artists, to like being curious about this whole NFT art phenomenon beyond the $69 million pieces, but just, all of a sudden you've got these high school kids that, back when I was a kid, I would draw on sneakers or draw on pieces of paper, but they've got their own little art business that they're doing. So I just feel like, creativity is sort of infesting the world right now. And everyone's trying to get onto any sort of surface, whether it's physical or virtual, and just scribbling on the walls and seeing if someone likes it. So it's, it's kind of a buffet. It's more trying to, I think it's sort of going to tried and true locations for inspiration. Now I'm kind of flipping up every rock to see what's under there.
I love that. I love the idea that creativity is just investing everything rather than it being stilted at all. Aoife, what's been your experience of the places you've been looking for inspiration, or the places you found it changed or broadened? What's your impression?
I was going to say inhaling markers, but obviously that's a joke. I think for me, honestly, I spent so much time like any young person online, and I got a lot more involved with like badass gals. And honestly, like, I'm going to sound like a weirdo and I don't mind, like, I slid into so many people's DMs who were in like different disciplines than me, people who were further up the ladder at the same position, and people who were just looking to get their toes in the creative field, and just writing to people and just wanting to get like to know a little bit more about them. Because I don't know, maybe it's just me, I find advertising and PR is quite a competitive industry, like, and I find that really weird. I don't know, it's I can't imagine 3 accountants going into a room and kind of comparing their like Excel documents for whose is better. And I find that there is this kind of mentality there in the creative industry. And I really just wanted to remove that, and where I could help people, and equally where others could help me, whether it's just through conversation about advertising or something completely different. And very, very randomly, I wish I was going around looking at trees. Like, I wish I was that cultured, but gotten into golf. And I know that's exactly what you should be doing when you retire. And I am not there, despite the grays on my hair, but I love it. It's such a good thing to do. I never understood it. Anytime it was on the television, I'd turn it off, and now I'm obsessed. And it's just interesting because every person who's out there, I live in Essex, despite my skin not being orange, that is where I am based. And it's funny because most of the men you meet out on the course, have already had these like hugely successful careers, and I don't know, maybe they don't like it, but I love going up to them and just like chatting to them and kind of hearing about what they've done in their life, and the kind of what ads that stick out to them and what really appeals to them, because I think you get so easily caught up in making work that's for other advertising or PR people rather than focusing on the consumer and those things that actually really, really connect with them. I don't know if we're allowed to bring up ads, but I'm going to. Heineken have this ad out at the moment, and it's absolutely brilliant. You know, it's this little TVC, and it's about, you know, being careful with your Heineken, that you don't put it down and, you know, misplace it because someone else could pick up your drink. And it's so funny. You know, it's people putting on their like scrunchies around the lid. It's people writing their names on their bottle or like tearing up little parts of the label. And that for me, like, has been my favorite piece of work during this whole lockdown, because I was like, God, it's so true. And you know, it's doing really, really well because Carl in accounting likes it and Carl doesn't like anything. So, you know, it's really, really, really good creative work. And I think that's really inspiring. So I think probably that's been my favorite kind of moments in terms of, you know, going off the usual tracks, which is like spending all day looking at the drum or whatever. Yeah. It's getting talking to people.
Yeah, people as inspiration. It's been a great leveler the last year, hasn't it? It feels like you can ask anyone how they are and you're expecting, you know, whatever level they are, whatever business they're in, you're expecting a genuine, you know, human answer, aren't you, to that question now? And it just feels like we've got more permission to have different sorts of conversations with people. It's really interesting. Talk to me a bit about technology and different tools you might be using now and other things as well as technology that you want to take forward from this time. So maybe you've kind of discovered a way of doing something that you hadn't occurred to you before, and that's going to be something that is a great thing to take forward for you. Are you using different tools and different bits of technology, using things in different ways?
I don't think there's any new tools that I'm using that I wasn't using previously or other people aren't using. So I don't think, no, I don't think there's one piece of tech that's really been the savior. I think there's certain, it's going to sound odd coming from someone who works at a tech agency, but I think there's something to be very mindful of, and that's overexposure or just too much coming down the channels. We all feel a bit zoomed out at times. I think there's one thing that I've learned, it's that let the creative process breathe. There's a point where you can just be on call after call after call. And actually, as much as we find inspiration through talking, we have to process all that information. And a lot of the time that gets done in a very sort of solitudal, that word, manner, anyway. And that sort of happens as we're going about our day. I mean, I sort of get my best ideas when I'm sort of in autopilot. Like a lot of people say, go for a walk. I don't like going for a walk because it actually clears your head. It makes you too relaxed. If you go for a drive, your brain's still engaged. So you're still thinking about not crashing. So it's still active, but at the same time, it's so autopilot engaged that you're sort of still, you know, a couple of cogs still working away and trying to process all this information that you've gathered, all the inspiration, the client requirements, the market sector, you know, everything. Because this whole thing about creative, it's about finding clarity of vision. It's like we're sort of trying to work out the end goal, and it's like a giant dot to dot. And we're trying to find the star shape in there, and we've got to join all those dots up. So, you know, it's letting the processor go through its process, I guess. And that brief, I mean, that brief is really the most important part at the moment. Quiz that in its minutest form, because that brief has to be right in the first place. Otherwise, this whole process is just a waste of time. So, you know, it's working with the clients from that to make sure that we are answering, asking the right questions and answering the right problems, I guess. And also, apparently, well, I never thought this was possible that a beard would be too long for a creative, but I found that around March the 20th, I think. So that was about...
You've been told the beard's too long, G.
Yeah, it was a good 4 months into not having a cut. That's the point when you should have a cut.
Sean, what about for you? Have there any new tools or techniques that, or any new ways of working that you're keen to take forward out of this period?
Yes, there's been one invaluable tool which I've come to know and love, and that's been the do not disturb status on my computer. Because, you know, pre-pandemic, you'd get a bing or a buzz and you go, oh, okay, well, let me check it. But right now, everything bings, buzzes, notifies, and, you know, you've got your phone next to your computer, next to possibly some sort of tablet device. And so a buzz triplicates out. So finding some time where people can leave you alone because everything's virtual and I can actually get into my own head has been, I would say, the most undervalued tool that I've known to come and love. Is just do not annoy me for at least 30 minutes.
I need to do that more often. Aoife, how do you balance those tools with, you know, the tools and techniques that you're learning and have learned over the past year with still having that headspace?
You know, it's hard. You know, originally I think everyone got so excited about working from home because it's kind of like, you know, there was such a push beforehand about getting, you know, remote working environments and flexi hours. And I think, as like both of the lads have said, it's not like that. If anything, I feel like I'm on call all of the time. You're like a creative doctor, but on not as good of a salary. And, you know, it can get an awful lot. So I think one of the things like me and my partner, Lena, love to do, depending on who's on the call with us, to give us that little extra minute is you kind of find the flaws in tech and how you can use that to your advantage. Like everybody freezes on Zoom. So you just stay still give yourself that extra 3 seconds to get that answer, pretend you're gone and come back and you have something great. Because I think, you know, it's hard when you've been in the office and you have like your pitch meeting, you can work off each other's energy, but you then have these kind of other outside factors that come in, whether it's, you know, you're on a call to a client and one of you is supposed to pitch and their internet suddenly cuts out and having to like pick up from that moment, and you just have to stay agile all of the time, and that can be absolutely exhausting. And then I think as well, like every brief for the past while has been, and how do we put this on TikTok? And you're like, there's other things out there. Like there are other things we could be doing. And you know, it's great. Like I love TikTok, but it is really funny just how the platforms have changed so quickly in terms of where people want to be seen. I'm quite excited to kind of see the next age of creativity and app development. You know, there's this really cool app coming out. Maybe it's been released now. I think it's called Thursday. And it's a dating app that is only active on Thursday. And I was like, thank God, because I literally go out with my friends and I barely see them because they're stuck on their phones. They've got their Tinder, their Bumble, their Hinge. And I'm like, okay, if I just can get rid of those and they can have their Thursday doing that. I was like, perfect. You know, there's so much great things that come with tech. And, you know, we're so lucky to be living in an age where, you know, this pandemic happened and that we could all, for the most part, successfully work from home. You know, had this happened 20 years earlier when we had one phone in our home house, which had a cord of about this length, I don't think so. We're living in the world of dial-up, that, you know, we've so much to be grateful of and appreciative for, but equally I'm very much looking forward to a break from. I think, Sean, it was easy to set a second. It was like, I literally have 2 iPads, a laptop, and a phone around me. And like, you always hear like in, you know, Black Mirror that tech is going to take over. And it's like, if so, I'm surrounded. Like, send help.
Yeah, I think we can all feel that one, Aoife. Just quickly, last question before we wrap up, and I'll come to you first. What one thing have you learned about creativity or yourself as a creative over the past year?
Good question. I'm not sure if it's about what I've learned about myself. I think it's what we have in front of us. Okay. So look, we've got the opportunity here to rebuild this world however we wish. It's a blank canvas. We can rip up the rule book and we can make it better, right? We can make it more accessible, more inclusive, and more connected than ever before. And the world is now one big, exciting challenge. And that makes it the perfect environment for creativity to flourish, which is something which we've been referencing all the way throughout. So I never imagined that we'd ever have the opportunity and the means actually to reinvent this planet. Like, this is a once in a generation opportunity. And I feel really fortunate to be part of that. So you know what, let's use the very best of our abilities not to fuck it up. But equally, I think by having our freedoms removed has reminded us all of the importance of being free. So like pre-COVID, we were basically chained to our desks. During COVID, we were chained to our bloody dining tables. So like post-COVID, I hope this conversation moves away from sort of finding work-life balance and more into work-life integration, I guess. Because for me, like, time is irrelevant, place is unimportant. So it's a bit like, Lord, don't slow me down, right?
Yeah, love it. Thank you, G. And Sean, what one thing have you learned about creativity or yourself as a creative over the past year or so?
I would say when it comes to myself, I have literally, I think, doubled down my filter on the no asshole rule. I think I agree. I think we have a lot of work to do. I think this is a once in a generational kind of moment. And I think we have some really challenging headwinds ahead of us. So I don't want to be dragged down by assholes. So I would rather go all in with people who want to roll their sleeves up, get things done, tackle big ideas and big challenges, and choose to expend my energy on that. And I think relative to creativity in general, I think that what I've really learned about that is that people have a lot of untapped potential and they are a lot more confident with it now. And so as we get back to whatever the new form of normal is, those of us who choose quote unquote creativity as a job, we're going to have to like bring our AP game, it's our advanced placement game, instead of just like our A game to the table, because people have also been filtering, I think, the type of content that they've been consuming, and their expectations are going to be that much higher, sort of going forward. So
yeah, interesting thoughts. And Aoife, what have you learned? What one thing have you learned about creativity and yourself as a creative over the past year?
For sure. I think probably it's like disbanding labels I probably put on myself or others put on us. You know, for my accent, I'm from Ireland, like my partner's from Hungary, and people naturally presume I'm the copywriter and she's the art director. And it was kind of just roles that we were just like, yeah, that's how we are, because that's how we are viewed. And we completely ripped that apart and changed how we approached creative. And I think it's been something that's been really great for us and has made us stronger as a team. You know, is spending those extra hours that we did have bringing confidence to Lena and her writing, because that had been kind of taken away from her, whether it was something we'd naturally kind of been doing ourselves or, you know, others had kind of presumed, and equally allowing myself the opportunity to put, you know, my drawings out there, because that was something I feared I couldn't do, because you want to fit in or we used to want to anyway, fit into the boxes that people wanted us to fill, and now we just don't care. And I think that's so refreshing to kind of get to a point where you're just like, look, we love working with each other, we love this industry, but we're going to love the way we do it. And I think at the moment we're just in a position where we've been able to be that way and turn down roles that haven't suited us, and not take those labels anymore, because I think, you know, there's been so many great conversations that have happened over the pandemic, and some really, really big promises made by agencies and brands that I'm really looking forward to see if they hold true. It's potentially going to be a really, really, really exciting time, or, you know, it's going to be another one of those, you know, what was it, like Fatima might have a career in tech and she doesn't even know it yet. You know, I'm hoping we don't go down that route. But yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest learning curve, is just kind of really appreciating yourself, your work, and your partner, and really finding your values and sticking to them.
Lovely. Thanks, Aoife. Thank you all very much. Well, wrap up then. That's been a really exciting discussion. I think you should all carry on joining the dots and finding that star for your clients. It sounds like we're on the edge of something really interesting for creativity in the earned universe and beyond. So thank all of you for joining me today, and go on doing what you're doing. Thanks very much
for having us.
Thank you.